For those that are new and those that have forgotten, Portland used to be a great place to make and love music. It was easy because there were no impediments and everything was affordable and creativity converged, and it was just this magical place. And today, Nashville, Austin, Seattle, and Portland are the 4 fastest growing business centers in the US. And we've all felt how hard it is to have a city that grows that fast, and particularly when all except Portland in that list have strategically branded themselves as cities and holistically supported their local music scenes. Our scene isn't going to survive without advocacy and without organization and without good partners to protect it. So Music Portland is a local nonprofit. It is created by local people working to create the conditions in Portland so that independent music, businesses, musicians, and venues can continue to thrive here. We don't produce or promote music events. We work to support and create the infrastructure that makes those things possible. So our mission, our stated mission, is to unite, defend, and amplify. And unite because none of us are going to survive without the others. This is not an industry that lives in silos. It's become under pressure of a growing city. It's becoming a little siloed, but the reality is venues don't survive without an incredibly deep bench of local talent that they can tap. And producers don't survive if musicians don't have venues to play in, and it all connects. So it's truly an ecology that is worth protecting. And Music Portland has brought together thousands of music professionals at events like this and pro-development sessions and as basic members. And for those of you that haven't, please take a minute and do a Music Portland profile. It makes you a basic member of Music Portland. It's entirely free, and it pulls us together. It makes you part of this thing. Don't count on the algorithms of Instagram or Facebook to make sure that you get the right message. Make sure that you're connected so we can get you information about opportunities and funding sources and new opportunities for collaboration and all the different things that we do. And if you've got the means, consider becoming a contributing member. You can do it for as little as $5 or $12 or $20 a month, and it really supports our work. We're all entirely unpaid, and there's never an obligation to pay, but we do ask that if you're able to, help us out, because all the money goes towards helping to fight you, for you, not to you. And then, I know.
I want to rework that pitch.
I get it. Yeah, I got to clean that one up. But yeah, we're fighting for you. That's it. That's the way. So defend was an original mission, but it's a little weird because it feels like in the age of social awakening, it needs a little bit of qualification. Our goal is not to merely defend the status quo, because the reality is our music ecology is neither equitable nor inclusive. It's great and it's wonderful, but it's happened organically in a city that is not equitable or inclusive. So naturally it's evolved that way. So Music Portland, in defending our ecosystem, we're defending to grow it, to grow opportunities and access and increase the excellence that we have because we're including everybody. And there are some big initiatives that are going to be announced soon in that regard, and we look forward to bringing those to you. The last mission for us is Amplify, and this is about promoting our scene and our businesses and our music and our impact to city leaders and local businesses and residents and visitors, and to continue to build our reputation as a center for, music curation and incubating new talent and innovation in all things. So that's where we came from. But COVID forced us to pivot around and around and around and around. And so we've kind of had to become the mouthpiece for independent music and a whole bunch of different discussions. And a lot of what we do, and this is partly my background, we're data driven, because if you just talk about music as a concept, it's very squishy. But the reality is we have hard numbers. And the more numbers you have and the more united we are, the more that you start to communicate the abundance of what we do rather than this scarcity model. We are an abundant ecology within the city of Portland, and our reports help to quantify that. So I know some of you roll your eyes and go, oh my God, another survey. we really do try to focus them, but it is about getting data so we can tell the story to people like Commissioner Eudaly, who need the information to be able to fight the fights that they need to fight. So, for instance, at the end of March, we did a survey and quantified nearly $8 million in lost income for Oregon musicians from canceled shows. And we did another whole survey that was quantifying how the OED had done in delivering promised government benefits to the music community. Spoiler, didn't perform. We continue to do relief work. We are working to highlight the eligibility of music businesses and musicians for grant programs, because this is a community that's never thought about going after grants. You know, where I think some of the traditional art forms, they know if you're an artist, you need to go and apply for a grant to do the project. Commercial music doesn't. Everybody's scrappy and doing it as best they can, but they don't necessarily think about grants first. So a lot of times they presume that the grants aren't for them. So we've spent time trying to highlight the grants that don't preclude them. In some cases they do. And I'm also advocating with grant providers to make sure that they're clear in their applications and their communications of whether or not they are inclusive for for-profit artists and music businesses. Because the problem is that if you apply for a business grant, you're denied because you're cultural. And if you apply for an arts and culture grant, you're denied because you're commercial. So as it stands right now, music lives in this weird no man's land that we're trying to find pathways through and do better for. And the final thing we've been doing on relief work is individual case management for people that are still waiting 7 months later for government relief that they were promised, for whether it's unemployment insurance or PUA, and certainly all the PUC $600 bumps. So we've been helping to collect, organize, and track the activity for music people that are still waiting. And we're working with Senator Merkley's office to file those with a special area where they have some leverage to escalate the treatment and guarantee a 7 to 14 day response time. And it can even be faster if you're really in dire situations. So we have 37 claims have been submitted through the process already. 5 have already reported partial or full payment in the first 10 days, and that's after 7 months of waiting. So please, if there's anybody listening that has yet to receive the employment benefits that they were promised and that they have filed for, please go to bit.ly. It's a bit.ly link /OED still waiting. OED is capital, still waiting is small case, and for those on the Zoom call, it should be in your chat. And give as much detail as you can about your situation. The more detail you give, the better. But it does seem to be working. We're now down to people that really need it, and we can fight, and that's what we do. So that's Speedball. Oh, I did it very fast. I'm so pleased. That is Speedball, a bunch of the things that we've been working on that, you know, is what a trade organization is, what an advocacy group does, and what we do in COVID. We would love people to get involved. Best way to do that is become a basic member and let us know the things that are interesting to you or ideas that you have. We want to represent the interests of our community. So now I want to jump into venue defense. That's been a big part of what we do, because if there aren't places to perform after COVID, there's no music recovery. We supported the statewide efforts from the Independent Venue Coalition that started up after COVID to secure Corona relief money for dedicated venues. And dedicated venues, the ones obviously that can't reopen feasibly until performance and assembly is allowed again. So this is after phase 3 or after a vaccine, really. So these places are really important for our local scene here in Portland, but Portland is a place where music happens everywhere. It's distributed throughout the city, in every neighborhood, in bars and restaurants and coffee shops and wine bars. It really is a lifestyle issue. And the diversity and constancy of music performance is a big part of what it defines us as a lifestyle and as Portlanders. And And it makes life in music possible here because there are lots of different places that pay musicians for their talent. And for that reason, Music Portland focused a lot of its advocacy on the city allocation, providing validation of why these venues were important and making sure that the business community signed on to say, this lifestyle is key for us as a competitive advantage, and making sure that we knew what community organizations the venues were supporting. So I was on the steering committee, and I'll talk a bit about that later, but I now want to introduce our guest, who's been patiently sitting there. Commissioner Chloe Eudaly has been on the Portland City Council, some of this is just recap, since 2016, and is responsible for 2 city departments that intersect directly with our music ecology: the Arts and Culture portfolio that she manages, and the Office of Community and Civic Life that used to be called ONI, or Office of Neighborhood Involvement. And last year, she supported the creation of Music Portland's Music Policy Council that is working to kind of untangle the spaghetti of city interactions with the music ecology, permitting and licensing and enforcement and all these things, and really trying to help make a conversation possible between city leaders and the music ecology to say, how can we do this better? But more recently, and the thing I think that really is a legacy here, is that she has championed the PDX Cares Venue Support Program. This is the largest allocation to support performance venues in any city in the country. Nashville just passed $2 million. We are 2.5. Seattle allocated $700,000. Austin allocated $400,000 and they can't get it to venues. This is an incredible thing. Not only is it the first time in history that the city has actually invested in our independent music culture, but it is the largest in the country. So when we go big. Full disclosure, Commissioner Eudaly is running for re-election in November and will participate in our candidate forum that's scheduled for September 29th at 4 p.m. We hope everybody will come to that. But this is not a campaign event. This is a candid conversation with our incumbent representative about how our city has or could support independent music, and what are the structural impediments that make that support hard to enact. So this is going to be a conversation. We're going to talk about the venue allocation and other things, but I am thrilled and excited to welcome Commissioner Chloe Eudaly.
Well, thank you, Mira. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. And I wasn't patiently waiting for that introduction. You really had my rapt attention. There are so many things going on right now that, I mean, under normal circumstances, we rarely take a beat and just appreciate what we've just accomplished. This is the first time that I've really been able to stop and think about the impact of that $2.5 million. So first, I want to acknowledge how critical you and Music Portland were, as well as Jim Brunberg and the Independent Venue Coalition. You made it so easy to be your champion. And I've been talking a lot throughout this crisis about how all our systemic failures are on full display, just how unsustainable it is that half of Americans live at or near the poverty line. Millions of Americans don't have health insurance. All of the inequities that I think most of us are now painfully aware of under normal circumstances are that much worse amidst this crisis. Mm-hmm. But you just reminded me how the strength of our communities are also on full display, and the way that this community came together to cooperate with each other, to support each other. There was never a moment where I felt someone was really advocating for their own interests. It was about the common good of the whole music community. So I just want to commend you for that.
Good. Well, it definitely, so many people, probably a number that are actually listening on this call, sorry for the cattail, that are listening on that,
You could open a zoo at this point.
I know, I've
Charging
got
admission.
squirrels and cats, and I know. There are lots of people wrote into city council. I mean, you guys, that is the thing about uniting, is that when you unite and you identify a common issue, then we can write in. And that's the partnership that we need to be building as an industry with our leadership, because they can't work in a vacuum. And they also can't work if a million people are coming at them from a million different directions about a million different things. You know, really making sure that you're educated about issues and that you bring your own personal stories to it. And that, I know that helps as well, because you heard that.
Yeah.
So it was a great thing to work on. And I gotta say, I was listening in on some of the city council meetings that were zoomed out to the world, and you were a fighter, woman. This was not a, Robert's Rules of Order kind of fight. This was bare knuckle. And I was just out here going, yeah, take it. That was great. It was really wonderful. It was impressive to see.
Thank you. I'm not sure what session you are referring to, but I accept that compliment.
Yeah, no, it was great. I mean, you really held your ground. You knew your stuff, and that's how we got there. So that was really fantastic. So before we came online, I was noting her furniture fixture behind her. How many of you can identify what that is? The woman has a record store display case in her living room. I told her she was pandering, but she says it's always there.
I mean, yeah, I didn't have this installed for this event. I did tell Mira earlier that my typical backdrop, giant piece of art, came off the wall due to the winds today. And I just thought, well, instead of trying to jerry rig it, I'm just gonna use my record.
Yeah, no, it's perfect. It's perfect. So what kind of, if you can talk about it, what kind of opposition did you face in fighting for the venue support? Were there specific sort of arguments that you had to face, or were there departmental things that made it hard?
Oh, you're starting kind of backwards with these questions.
Am I?
I mean, let's start at the beginning.
Okay.
Can we? Okay.
Sure.
Because I want to ease my way into that part of the
hard start. Sure.
Yeah. So the first question that I have on my list is, as the PDX Cares Venue Support Program champion within City Hall, what convinced you to fight so hard for our venues? I'm sorry to redirect, but I just feel like I have a story to tell, and the rest of it will kind of organically unfold. So I was telling Mira before we began that I was born in Portland, but I was raised in rural Oregon, Gales Creek and Sherwood. But I started sneaking into Portland around age 14. It was a really long bus ride and quite an adventure. And I really came of age in Portland's music scene. So shopping at Second Avenue Records and Django's and Dudley's and other record stores that have been gone so long, I don't remember what they were called. My first show was at the Starry Night. It was general public.
Nice.
Rest in peace, Ranking Roger. And Starry Night is now Roseland, for those of you who are quite a bit younger than I am. And, grew up going to places like Pine Street and Satyricon, Blue Gallery, and the X-Ray Cafe, which actually inspired me to open my own business, because I thought, well, if these guys can run a business, anyone can. No, I'm kidding. It was just the incredible creative energy that surrounded X-Ray that gave me the idea and really the confidence to open my own business, which was a specialty bookshop called Reading Frenzy. That was in 1984. And as a creative entrepreneur, I knew in this moment, flash forward, I don't know, 30, 25 years later, in this moment, I knew from my experience as a creative entrepreneur how little institutional support there is for for-profit businesses, even those that heavily contributed to our arts and culture landscape, like bookstores and art galleries and music venues. Like Mira was saying, it really is this kind of no man's land where your offerings are culturally significant and your motivation is love, not money, I think, for most people. But because you haven't officially, formed a nonprofit and set up a board and jumped through all of those hoops, there is so little support as far as grants out there. And I mean, that's actually an issue I raised with the city probably 15 years ago when we started talking about what eventually turned into the arts tax, was just this utter lack of support for this dozens, possibly hundreds of creative small businesses that were really meaningfully contributing to our arts community. And that were already starting to feel the pressure of gentrification and displacement. So I also recognized in this moment that live venues were going to be uniquely hard hit. The first to close, the last to reopen, hemorrhaging money from rolling cancellations and ticket refunds. And unlike many businesses that could potentially shut down and reopen in a new location, these spaces are vital to our community. You can't have a music venue in just any old storefront. Mm-hmm. And I was really afraid to think what could happen to once we lose these spaces to some other function, mm-hmm. they're potentially gone forever. So that was part of the motivation. And I also recognized that none of the relief schemes coming up from the federal government would work for you guys, for music venues. Mm-hmm. PPP didn't make sense. The other relief loan project, I can't remember, something.
Oh, the IDLE.
Yeah, yeah. That wasn't working. And so, yeah, unique needs and challenges. But there was also a significant economic analysis that went into this for me. I mean, I'm friends with Jim, I'm friendly with you, I have lots of friends in the music community, and I really had to check myself as a fan and a longtime member of the community if I was unfairly kind of privileging venues in this conversation. And I had numerous conversations outside of the community about this, and really came to the conclusion that music venues in particular are like a keystone species in our local economy.
I love that. That's great.
It's true. I mean, it's hundreds, if not thousands of jobs. There is a constellation of businesses that are dependent on music venues, either directly, whether they're vendors that you contract with, or equipment manufacturers, or graphic designers and print shops, or local hotels and restaurants and bars and cab drivers, who are all in some part dependent on the kind of vibrancy of our music community. And then there's the cultural, what's going on, Mira? Is it the baby squirrels or the cats? Oh, cookies are, wow. Okay, now I'm jealous.
Okay, is my life good or what?
Yeah. And so, and then of course there's just the cultural relevance. And like I said, I was really afraid of, very few venues own their buildings. Mm-hmm. And so in this reality, it seemed unlikely that many would make it through to the other side without assistance.
Yeah.
And that opens up the door for some big mega music promoter to move in and really monopolize our market. And I'm a buy local girl,
Yeah.
and I don't want to see that happen in any of our local business sectors, but especially not to music venues.
Well, one of the many amazing things to say about our music ecology is that we are 100% independent and locally owned, and none of the other top 10 or top 20, sort of lauded music cities in the country can say that. Like, and the corporate entertainment consortia have been trying hard for a long time to establish a venue here, and through a variety of means, they have yet to be successful. And I think it's one of our treasures. It really is. And so supporting it this way is a huge deal.
Absolutely. So, I mean, now I'm happy to answer the opposition question, although I would.
It's not personal. I'm saying, like, issue-wise, what were did people say no, rock and roll is bad? Or were, I mean, just at a very high level. I'm not looking for vilification at all.
Yeah, I mean, at the outset, so the city of Portland received around $114 million in CARES Act funds. The lion's share of that funding had to go to the city to pay for COVID-related expenses. Big chunk to the joint office for expanded services for people experiencing homelessness who were, very vulnerable and high risk in this crisis. And then we had a pot of money to talk about local relief, and the focus was on direct assistance to households, rent assistance, small business relief. And then I really pushed this conversation around phase 3 businesses. Mm-hmm. I think the main bone of contention was that people are hurting. We should get every dollar out the door to direct assistance to households and rent assistance. And my position, and it was a challenging one to take, is that we don't remotely have enough money to provide assistance to everyone in need. Mm-hmm. And the state and federal government absolutely has to step up. And they have in some ways since this conversation came to a close or was near a close. I mean, the CDC just passed new eviction guidelines, for instance. So, it doesn't come with funding like rent relief or landlord or lender assistance, but it does kick the can far enough down the road that we can continue the conversation about how we are going to meet the massive need for assistance in that arena, in housing. There's no way the city or state can do it. And so in my mind, I focused on businesses that did not seem to have any other visible means of support or relief coming. I was so astounded by what the state passed, and the city of Portland made arts relief a legislative priority at the state, and I called a few representatives and I talked about the need in public, but I can't really take any credit for that other than, supporting it. But back to the kind of analysis I did, these are small businesses. I believe, they're not just independently owned, they're all technically small businesses. Even our big venues would fall in that category. And there's one or two people behind most small businesses. And so in my mind, that is direct assistance. That's helping someone sustain their livelihood. It may be the biggest asset that they own. I know my business was. And it's also preserving jobs that we know will come back. And then again, that cultural kind of cultural significance of these spaces.
I think too, it's also like the idea of saying, we're going to tear down factories when the going gets tough and then wonder where the jobs are when things come back. These are not just businesses owned by individuals. These are the offices. This is the workplace of, there are more than 10,000 professional musicians in Portland based on CD Baby data. Wow. I mean, 10,000 in Portland. And then far more than that when you go outside. There are 700 music businesses that rely on those musicians that make money, that buy their stuff. You know, it really is an ecosystem. And that if you had to pick one place to make sure that you were supporting, you got to do that strategically. So I totally appreciate the fact that you saw that we needed to get stuff there.
Yeah, and I mean, it was a challenging conversation. And it was a complicated equation, really, because my brain goes to triage mode. Who is the least well served and the most at risk? Mm-hmm. And if I just went with that kind of calculation, mm-hmm. the results would have been different. Mm-hmm. But I had to think about, how do we get the most bang for our buck? Mm-hmm. If we give $500 to a family or to a household, that money is gone in a month and they're right back in the position that they were, you know, before they got that check. Mm-hmm. If we give assistance to these businesses, vital businesses to our local economy, those dollars go so much further, mm-hmm. and they preserve jobs. So
to use your phrase, they're keystone businesses in a keystone industry. And that I love that. I love that as a phrase. Let's go on to the next question, which is, and I think I didn't add things, but I may have. I may be.
No, I think you were just going in a different order, and I felt like,
you don't know yet if I've added things.
Do the introductory.
Still going to come flying at you. So, arts and culture is heavily biased, if not defined as, nonprofit arts and music in a lot of our culture. And independent for-profit music is often, like I was saying, is often excluded or it's disadvantaged in the way grants are written, in the way policy-making decisions are sort of processed. What do you think are the assumptions about our local for-profit music scene that are still held within City Hall, that are just sort of default assumptions that people bring to the party? Oh, like, no, if you're in music, you make a lot of money, or, you know, oh, those guys are all slackers, or, you know, like, what are the biases, just informally, that you think exist within City Hall, either structurally or by individuals, that will make it hard to move ahead as partners?
So, I mean, again, I wouldn't characterize it quite the way you are, Mira. I think we all bring different experience to the table, and definitely having grown up in the music scene, loving music. I've never been in a band, but I will karaoke just about any time.
I've heard that about you, and you will be called upon at some point. So
I can't wait. It's one of the hardest things about this shutdown is not being able to karaoke with my little crew. I do have an online karaoke option now, but it's fun, but it's not the same. And also I worry about disturbing my neighbors because I sing really loud. So some of the challenges, you know, I ran a small retail business for 22 years. I'm the only commissioner that has run that type of business. So I bring that kind of experience and like just knowledge of the challenges. I do think there's an assumption with some about some business owners that, oh, you own this big venue, you must be loaded. And people have no idea. Like a lot of small business owners I know, you have to create a facade of like abundance and success. You have to give your patrons a certain level of experience. You may make less than almost anyone else in your employment. That's the reality. And that's why I say this is often more about love than it is profit. So there may be an assumption there. And then I do think, you know, when I opened Reading Frenzy in 1994, the following year, I applied for the first and only grant that I ever received in 22 years from RAC. And it was a professional development grant to attend a small press convention. And that was the last year that they gave those grants to people like me, who I'm not technically an artist and I don't run a nonprofit. But even though my business was definitely not for profit, it wasn't a formal nonprofit, and it just, at some point, it seems like almost every grant giving institution made that call. And you know, being a nonprofit, it's just a tax status with the IRS.
Yeah.
Nonprofits can engage in profit-making activities. They've just proven that they're providing some level of benefit to the community, and they have a certain structure and they have certain oversight. And your donations are tax deductible. So I think that's really the challenge.
Yeah.
In my conversations with some foundations, I feel like they're coming back around to realizing just how many people, small business owners in particular, venues and other kind of arts-oriented businesses really significantly contribute to the landscape and deserve support.
Yeah.
So it may still, and I'm not talking about my colleagues at City Hall, I'm talking about the larger community of donors. That may still be a hurdle, but I think it's an important conversation to have, because especially in Portland, like you said, Portland used to be a cheap place to live with a lot of room to do your thing. And that allowed this amazing arts community to grow and thrive. And now we live in a city where you have to earn 120% of the median family income to afford the rent. $15 an hour job will afford you a room in a shared house. And I really worry about what we are losing, especially in the upcoming generations.
Yeah.
When you have to hustle for a buck every minute of every day, it just changes your whole mindset.
Yeah, creativity doesn't happen when you're underwater, you know.
Yeah.
And it feels, that was definitely when we started Music Portland 2 years ago, there was just this oppressive sense of there's just not enough. And as I say, you know, gathering together, people are like, wait a minute, there's a lot of us and we're mighty and we have a place here and we have something to say. And I think, you know, having had 2 years of kind of build up and then have this hit, you know, it at least put us in slightly better stead. You know, I was on the steering committee for the grant application, like making sure that we were asking the right questions for the venues that are applying for the grant. And even that process, you know, I think that people are used to working, some of the other grant writers are used to working for, you know, in sort of nonprofit grant writing. And there are biases, there's language, and there are assumptions that are made. And being a part of that process, I found myself in there saying, well, wait a minute, no, and that's what I ask about, you know, sort of assumptions and misperceptions and the things that are never spoken that already put you at a disadvantage before you start. And that thinking about what what issues do we need to bring to light to say, here's the reality for venue owners. Their average margin is this compared to an Arby's, which is that. It's like starting to tell the story of what it means to be a producer in Portland, and what it means when, the building codes change the rules of the game because of something, because they were never written down. It's like, what is the impact of city to this thing?
Yeah.
We need to create a partnership relationship rather than a punitive one, which is where it is right now. I think there's a lot of things that sort of view music, as a nuisance in some cases. I think some people appreciate it. They love to have it, and it's great, when it's going well. But then, it's off the rails, and then it becomes immediately the worst possible thing. And
I mean, music brings a little chaos, right?
oh, God love you. God love you. That's right. It's a good thing.
My team was just reminiscing today about like some of our favorite accomplishments and events, and one of our goals has been to just throw as many parties and host as many events as we can at City Hall, and really invite in the whole community, because that building belongs to all of us. And probably our all-time favorite event was Dead Moon Night. It was 17 or 18. I'm in a time warp.
Wednesday.
We had it on a Friday full moon in October, and Eric Isaacson from Mississippi Records organized 13 different musicians and bands to each play a Dead Moon cover song. We had thrones made. I mean, this is a lot of volunteer effort. Virtually everything was donated. Thrones made for Fred and Tootie. And it was an incredible night, and I think about 1,300 people came out.
That's awesome.
And it came off with, some minor hitches, but for me, having grown up in punk clubs, I thought, well, that was a success. We got a broken hinge, and we only had to kick one person out of City Hall, but people were pretty freaked out.
Yeah.
And they suggested that maybe next time I wanted to have a rock show, I have it at the Memorial Coliseum. And I said, well, I'll consider that. But I do want to talk about one more kind of like fundamental challenge. And I'm not suggesting that this is, well, it's definitely not like specific to City Hall. I just think it's a pervasive attitude in our culture, which is the measure of your worth is your profit. And arts can never thrive in that environment. And or the measure of your success is how appealing you are to a mass market. I mean, these are challenges I had with my own business, because Reading Frenzy was devoted to independent media and small press and progressive and radical writers. And I was catering to a very small crowd, but that's where my passion was. That was my community. It is my community. And I saw a need that I could fill, and I eked out a very modest living for 22 years. It got incredibly hard those last few years as my rent went through the roof. And the housing crisis is really what compelled me to run for city council. So that's a really big conversation, but it's one that I'm very committed to having. And I think in this moment, it's an opportunity really to reconsider what is essential and what we want to, whether support, defend, foment, cultivate, preserve. I love this. I love our arts community. And I agree with you that it needs, like many institutions within the city, it needs to be more reflective of our whole community. and we have to hold ourselves accountable in new ways for the fact that it's not,
Yeah.
and figure out how we're going to change that.
I have a question on that. As you know, through the process of really bringing together all the venues with Jim and the Independent Venue Coalition, with the work that we were doing, it really became so glaringly obvious that it is white men that own the venues in Portland. And there's been groups working and discussing establishing a BIPOC owned and managed performing arts center. What resources, I know you're in favor of this because I've heard you talk about this, but what city resources do you think could be leveraged to make that happen? Like, is there property in the city that could be leveraged in a way to do it? What kind of skin in the game do you think the city has to making that initiative happen? Because the industry wants to support it. I know the venues are keen to do their part, but what's the city bringing to the party?
So I'm not sure that I should go into specific details, but there is one organization in particular that I'm working with, trying to identify a space. And it's not just the city. We need to look at the county and metro as well. We all own a lot of property, and we should be having conversations right now about the best use of every asset that we have. Whether it's a closed community center or a defunct cultural center, or a park, a pool, empty schools, whatever. There are definitely spaces out there that would be appropriate. Funding is going to be a challenge because we're in this moment, just because of how hard hit the city is going to be. But Prosper Portland has programs and grants specifically tailored to BIPOC entrepreneurs. I think there's a lot of potential. We need some plans to solidify so I can really go out and find the resources. And we're kind of closer to the beginning of that conversation. Right now.
And it clearly, in this particular moment, the idea of creation seems a little outside the pale. Right now it is sustainable. But it is great to know that you and other people are definitely focused on that as a topic, and Music Portland is definitely interested in engaging the corporate community into that conversation, because there's catch up to be done. I will say also, in light of the metro and city property and resources, I'll be talking with you about our music hub, which we had $2.5 million already dedicated from a corporate underwriter, and we had a space donated to create rehearsal spaces, production facilities, like sort of like an open signal for music.
Love it.
And that particular property fell apart. We've looked at other ones since, but I want to get into the loop on the metro conversation, because I know that they have a lot of stuff and things that maybe they thought were going to become something, but now with COVID clearly aren't. So that some of the calculus about how they use properties may have changed, and I'd love to kind of revisit some of that.
And I think we need to pitch some creative ideas to them. I mean, people outside of the arts community don't necessarily understand how we are accustomed to working with temporal spaces and growing in the cracks and nooks and crannies. And if you have a building that you're going to tear down in a year, we could potentially still use it. And as an incubator or in a launching pad for
rehearsal space. Hey, we've got only 3 minutes before we go dark. We don't have to go dark right away. This is what happens when we talk. This is what happens.
Fun.
But is there anybody are you able to join us for the breakout? Because people may have general questions to ask in there as well.
Sure. I mean, I need to grab a snack because I haven't had dinner yet.
Sure. And another glass of juice. Yes. But yeah, if you can join us in there, we'll gather up some questions and people can ask themselves. And Austin will make sure that you have the link to get in for the breakout. But thank you so much. I mean, this is what I wanted to have happen, was just a conversation.
Yeah.
You know, and I am remiss that I didn't have you in sooner, because you are the commissioner for this community. And, you know, I wish that we've been having these conversations right along, because I think there's so much that can be done, and so much appreciation and thanks for what you have done, because it really is remarkable by any
Oh
measure.
gosh, thanks.
We are super appreciative. So go get yourself a snack.
All right.
And then come and join it. Oh, look, there in the chat is the
Oh,
link.
cool.
Grab and copy
Yeah.
that, because we're going to turn this one off.
I did want to mention to you, not to toot my own horn, but you mentioned civic life and the arts portfolio, which I have. But PBOT also plays a role with the musician loading zones.
Of course, there we go. Yes.
And even BDS, which I had for the first 18 months I was there, I was able to bring back the small business concierge, and that's a person really meant to help small businesses, small-time developers, and arts organizations navigate our very complex permitting system.
Are they still in place?
They are, yeah, as far as I know. I mean, the mayor has the bureau now, but I'm fairly certain they are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, you go get your snack. We're going to go and let everybody else chat and come and join us.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Back in a few.